Alleged Chinese spies are caught again in the US military. China threatened Thailand with retaliation. And Missouri sues China for billions. That and more on this week's China News Headlines. Welcome to China Uncensored. I'm Chris Chappell. This episode is sponsored by Incogni. You probably know the companies are collecting your personal data, but you may not realize just how many. Dozens, maybe hundreds, most of which you've never heard of. And you have no idea what they're doing with your data. Incogni helps stop them. I'll explain more at the end. Well, I wanted to start off with something positive, but it turns out it hasn't exactly been that kind of week. So we'll start with something incredibly horrific instead. Last month, Thailand secretly deported Uyghurs back to China. Well, maybe not that secretly since we're talking about it, but rights groups and international officials called on Thai authorities not to deport them. Even U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio urged Bangkok not to carry out the deportation. But Thailand did it anyway. Those men have literally been black-bagged. And now we have an idea why. Thailand was afraid of retaliation from China if they didn't. Ironic that the CCP calls Uyghurs the terrorists. Of course, this shows not only the danger of the Chinese Communist Party influencing other countries, but also the weakness of the United States. That China's threats have become more powerful than the United States. What has the world come to? Speaking of people doing things they shouldn't for China, one former and two active-duty U.S. Army soldiers have been charged in a scheme that involved allegedly selling sensitive military information to China. The accused are the former soldier Royo Duan and two active-duty soldiers Jian Zhao and Li Tian, all of whom were arrested in Oregon last week. And it's appropriate this took place in the Beaver State because, damn! All three are charged with conspiring to commit bribery and theft of government property. Zhao is facing additional charges of conspiring to obtain and transmit national defense information to an individual not authorized to receive it. But let's get into the juicy details. Tian and Zhao were both based out of the Joint Base Lewis McChord in Washington State. Ah, what a scenic site for espionage! According to the U.S. Department of Justice, between 2021 and 2024, the former soldier, Duan, allegedly paid one of the current soldiers, Tian, to gather sensitive information and bring it to him. Meanwhile, Zhao, the other active-duty soldier, a supply sergeant, conspired to obtain and send national defense information, including many classified hard drives marked secret and top secret, to the CCP. After negotiating with several people in China, he allegedly received a payment of $10,000 for the information. That's all? For top secret classified information? Not only is he a terrible spy, but he's also a horrible negotiator. But wait, that's not all. Zhao allegedly received another $1,000 for an encrypted military computer that he stole from the US government. This computer looks like it's from circa 1983, so I guess the CCP would have gotten their money's worth if it had made it to China. He also allegedly received another $4,000 for sensitive documents that included information on the HIMARS system and US military readiness for war with China. FBI Director Kash Patel says the men will face American justice after stealing America's defense intelligence capabilities and empowering adversaries like China in betrayal of our country. That's right. None shall escape the watchful, unblinking eyes of American justice. Speaking of court cases, the state of Missouri has won a court case against the Chinese Communist Party and plans to seize assets to settle the $24.5 billion judgment. But can it collect? Back in 2020, the Show Me state launched a lawsuit under former Missouri Attorney General Eric Schmidt against the Chinese Communist Party, accusing it of hoarding medical supplies that could help with COVID-19 treatment. Naturally, China said the lawsuit was ridiculous and refused to show up to court proceedings. If only Thailand could have swooped in and forcibly sent them over like they did to the Uyghurs. Last Friday, District Judge Stephen Limbaugh ruled in favor of the state, allowing for Missouri to collect $24.5 billion from China. This week, China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs said its pandemic-era actions aren't subject to the jurisdictions of American courts and accused the U.S. of using frivolous lawsuits to smear and defame China and shift the blame, which it said will never succeed. And he may have a point, because getting that money won't be easy. One Marquette University political scientist pointed out that such processes usually involve international arbitration. He said a state acting on its own could be a problem because that can really complicate relations between the countries, and added that the prospects of money actually changing hands is very slim. But Missouri wants to collect by seizing Chinese assets in the U.S., such as Chinese-owned farmland. China-related interests own about 44,000 acres of Missouri farmland. Is that feasible? I guess we'll see. Given how hard Missouri is pushing this, Missouri should change its name to the Show Me the Money state. Speaking of China-owned U.S. land, a slew of bipartisan bills addressing the issue of American farmland owned by Chinese interests and American agricultural supply chains have popped up in the House of Representatives and the Senate, including a bill to protect farmland from national security risks, called the Foreign Agricultural Restrictions to Maintain Local Agriculture and National Defense, or Farmland Act, and the Promoting Agriculture Safeguards and Security, or PASS Act, a movement to ban Chinese farmland purchases near military bases that is gaining steam in the Senate. Man, who do they pay to come up with these names? Also recently introduced or reintroduced are the Securing American Agriculture Act, designed to protect the U.S. agricultural supply chain from the CCP, and the Farm and Food Cybersecurity Act, designed to protect American agriculture infrastructure from cyber threats. Each of these acts does something slightly differently, but all of them come down to the same concern: Chinese involvement in American agriculture. Republican Senator Joni Ernst, one of the backers of the Farmland Act, believes that the U.S. has an outdated system which has allowed China's malign influence to threaten our security by buying up our nation's land. Always glad to see when someone watches this channel. While no foreign countries officially own any American land, Chinese interest groups have purchased U.S. farmland at a rate that has only increased throughout the years. Some of this land is conveniently located near military bases. Conveniently. For example, a 2023 plan by the Fufeng Group to buy land near a sensitive military base in North Dakota scared lawmakers and other federal officials and eventually got blocked over national security concerns. Not letting China get U.S. farmland is a smart idea, if for any other reason than because you don't want folks in charge of food who, when you ask about the Chinese famine, say, "Which one?" And after the break, China and Canada face rising tensions. Welcome back. China is trying to befriend India and make the elephant and dragon dance amid the U.S. tariff war, which has got to be awkward given the actual fighting the two have done over borders. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi encouraged China and India to take the lead in opposing hegemonism and power politics, and said that making the dragon and elephant dance is the only right choice. It is an interesting choice, making India be represented by the hard-working elephant instead of the traditional fierce tiger. Definitely not China showing insecurity. These statements came after a meeting of the National People's Congress, where Wang insinuated that Indian-Chinese cooperation could combine to strengthen the global South and democratize international relations, because the CCP is such an expert at democracy and treating the global South fairly. While we're at it, why don't we put Diddy in charge of celibacy? India hasn't responded to Wang Yi's statement. They left them on read, basically saying it won't happen in this lifetime or even the next they're reincarnated into. India and the U.S., along with the West more broadly, have been growing closer due to the traditional hostility between the two Asian giants. Trump even recently offered India support for an alternative trade route to Europe through the Middle East that could circumvent China's Belt and Road Initiative, as well as increased arms sales. And if anyone loves arms, it's Hindus. India has good reason not to trust the Chinese Communist Party, given how it treats the Philippines. According to them, once again, China has been monitoring Philippine supply runs to the grounded Sierra Madre warship on the disputed Second Thomas Shoal. This kind of behavior is exactly why the Philippine defense chief warned that his country and its allies will fight China if it restricts flights over the South China Sea. Defense Chief Gilberto Teodoro expressed concern over the possibility of the CCP imposing a so-called Air Defense Identification Zone or other exclusion zone to restrict aircraft movement, which they did in 2013 over the East China Sea and the disputed Senkaku Islands, which are claimed by both China and Japan. It's nice to see everyone learning from China's mistakes, besides, China. The US, Japan, South Korea, and Australia have all ignored these so-called air defense exclusion zones China's created. But the Philippines have a lot less clout and might be unable to ignore them on their own. Good thing they have allies, including Canada. Canada and the Philippines have announced they will sign a defense pact to boost combat drills and military ties. This is on top of last year's agreement between Canada and the Philippines on defense cooperation. And 2023's 5-year agreement allowing the Philippines to use Canada's dark vessel detection system, which offers state-of-the-art remote sensing technologies, allowing the country to detect illegal, unreported, or unregulated fishing. All of this supports Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos Jr.'s goal of solidifying alliances with like-minded countries to counterbalance China in the region and protect shipping routes through the South China Sea. A number of countries have either already signed similar agreements or in talks to do so, such as Japan, Australia, New Zealand, and France. And China isn't happy about any of this. In fact, they're already going after Canada by imposing retaliatory tariffs on some Canadian imports, which is very odd since China recently offered solidarity to Canada and dangled the prospect of increased trade in the face of President Trump's tariffs on both countries and Mexico. I guess China believes the enemy of my enemy is also my enemy. Me against the world, suckers! This move is in retaliation for Canada's imposition last October of 100% import levies on Chinese electric vehicles and a 25% tariff on steel and aluminum from China. The CCP said the Canadian tariffs broke World Trade Organization rules, threatened Chinese legitimate rights and interests, and are typical acts of protectionism. Meanwhile, Canadian officials called China's retaliatory tariffs unjustified and said they're open to dialogue to resolve them. And with China's faltering economy and Canada's own vulnerabilities, President Trump must surely be thinking both sides are doing his work for him. Now I've got a video to show you that you're going to love. But first, this episode is sponsored by Incogni. Whenever you do anything online or use apps on your phone, there are tons of companies that collect your personal data. I'm talking names, social security number, home addresses, employment history, all sorts of things you might not want to be public knowledge. When I signed up for Incogni 3 years ago, I discovered there were dozens of data brokers that potentially had my private information without my permission. This was terrifying. So what did I do? I've been getting as many of these companies as possible to delete my data from their systems, and I did it using Incogni. You can too. Incogni has already gotten my details removed from 475 of these data brokers who've collected my info, and I didn't have to do anything after signing up. Incogni just handles it. So get Incogni for yourself and reclaim your own data. Go to incogni.com/uncensored and use the code uncensored to get 60% off an annual Incogni plan. Get your personal data off the market with Incogni. And before YouTube's algorithm sends you off to some random video, check out this video about why China's anti-corruption campaign is actually creating more corruption. That in-depth episode is only available on our website, ChinaUncensored.tv. You can click here to see it. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. See you next time.